3 or more notes played simultaneously with a harmonic function is the definition of chords we're going with today. Now that's a simple definition, but it's not the easiest thing to master, especially on a guitar where people make books like these that incorrectly make you believe you need to memorize 12,000 chords. You don't need to memorize 1,000 chords or even hundreds of chords. You just need one system that shows you why and how chords work so you can build, modify, and actually understand them to make music. And I'm going to give that all to you in this one long video so you don't have to go to the other guitar YouTube teachers that sprinkle knowledge across hundreds of video lessons. That's really annoying and hard to organize. Imagine picking up your guitar and finally knowing, not guessing, but knowing deeply exactly what every chord does and how to create the sounds you love without second guessing. That will be you if you follow this video. Let's begin. Now, the first thing you should know is that every chord comes from scales. And by the way, if you want to follow along with this video easily, you can download the ebook in the description. It has all of this laid out for you with song examples and practice tips and so on. I'll just assume you've heard a major scale at some point in your life. To turn this scale into chords, we just need to pick any note and then follow this simple pattern. Play, skip, repeat. So starting from C, we play C, then we skip D, play E, skip F, play G. That gives us 3 notes, C, E, G, which spell our first chord type, triads. Triad because these have 3 notes, like a tricycle or a triceratops. Now here's the really interesting part. We followed this exact same pattern to make almost every chord, even the ones that sound complicated like major 7 sharp 11. It all comes back to this simple idea, and it's really cool once you see it. But we'll discuss the more advanced stuff later. We have to build up to it. But triads still have so much to offer us, so we'll go back to our C major scale, and now we'll go to the second note D and apply the same exact pattern. Play, skip, repeat. We get a D minor triad. Now I think you understand where the rest of this is going. Since we have 7 notes in the scale, we can apply this pattern 7 times and then something really amazing happens. Just follow these chords first. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished back to C major. The amazing thing is, this exact pattern, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Just memorize it because it applies to every single major key in music. And most of your favorite songs just use these 6 chords mixed up in some fun order. So if you were to start for the G major scale as an example, 1 is G major, 2 is A minor, 3 is B minor, and so on. Even if it's something crazy like a B flat scale, the same pattern applies. If you've ever wondered what the number system is, it's literally just this. Pick any key in all of music, count the scale notes in order from 1 to 7, and then apply the pattern. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So if you're back in the key of C and someone says play a 4 chord, they always mean go to the 4th note of the scale and play a major chord. The fancy jazzy 2-5-1. It's just a 2 minor, a 5 major, or dominant, we'll get to that later, I promise, and then a 1 major. Now if we go back to our list of C major chords, you'll notice we have 3 types of triads, major, minor, and diminished. But we also have one more, and it's called augmented. The augmented triad isn't found in the major scale, but I promise we'll cover why that exists as well later. Let's first just quickly understand how these 4 triads work intervallically. Intervals is just a fancy word for the distance between notes. So a major triad, we have root note, major 3rd, and perfect 5th. To make this minor, we turn the major 3rd into a minor 3rd. Then to make that minor triad diminished, we turn the perfect 5th into a diminished 5th. Diminished simply means to lower something. And for augmented, we just go back to our major triad, and then we turn the perfect 5th into a sharp 5th. To augment means to increase. Quick recap number 1. So far we've built every chord using the same system. Play, skip, repeat. That gave us 3 triads, but we also have a 4th because there are 4 triads total: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. So just by understanding triads and a bit of scale theory, we already have the 7 core chords in all of diatonic harmony. And remember that diatonic harmony is where just about every song comes from, at least all of the more common popular ones. So instead of memorizing 12,000 chords, so far we just have to memorize 4 triads, which is obviously so much easier. But there are still a few other really cool 3-note chords outside of our 4 typical triads. One is often treated very mysteriously, but like everything else that's taught correctly, is actually really simple. They're called sus chords, and there's only 2 types. But to understand sus chords, we need to first understand the most simple chord progression, the 1-5-1. In the key of C major with triads, that's going to be C major, G major, back to C major. This motion is everything from Beethoven to Black Sabbath. It's the most fundamental motion in all of chord progressions. The simple reason it works is because 1 is our home, 5 is a far off place that we don't want to stay forever. Maybe you could think of it as your in-laws who live across the country. I don't know. But the only point is, once we get to 5, our in-laws' house, we really want to go back home, which is the 1 chord. So just to fully solidify this 1-5-1 sound, that's like me being home in New Jersey, the 1 chord where I want to be. Flying across the country to San Diego to see my in-laws, that's the 5 chord. And then coming right back here, home to New Jersey, we're back to the 1 chord. 1-5-1 is the direct flight. And all of those other chords we got from the scale, those are like different states and connecting flights. They can make the journey more interesting and more fun, but the direct flight is always 1-5-1. Everything is built on that idea of home, destination, home. All right, so the 1-5-1 progression is covered. Now we can understand why sus chords are really cool. And that's because instead of going on some far off journey, it's just taking you a little bit away from your home. It's like going outside to pick up your packages, but then coming back inside. But here's the thing to remember. You probably wouldn't go outside, get your package, open it up, and then sit there using what was inside the package. You would probably want to take that package back home, back inside. And that's the trick with sus chords. So we have the sus4, which is the most intense. Notice how it feels very unresolved, but soon as we get back home, it feels normal again. So we only have 2 sus chords. The first one is the sus4, which is the most intense. The second variety is the sus2 chord. These also feel unresolved, but they're not as intense as the sus4. You can also move from a sus chord to a minor chord. That works just as well. And you can even link these chords together. So we can add the sus4 and the sus2 to the chord list, but at this point we're at 6 chords total and things can get a bit confusing, so we're going to simplify it even further. Here's the big idea. Every chord we learn can fit in one of 3 categories. It's either going to be a major chord, a minor chord, or a tension chord. And every chord we play, for the most part, can fit in one of these categories. There are a few funky, really interesting chords that fit into more than one category, and that's really cool, but we'll cover that later as well. Now, when it comes to categorizing these chords, some of this is common sense. Major chords are in the major category. Minor chords are in the minor category. Diminished, augmented, sus4, and sus2 chords all go in the tension category because every one of these chords must be resolved back to a major or a minor chord. But this completely wraps up the 3-note chord category. The next logical step is to add one more note, which brings us to the 4-note category, and there are 3 types of chords here. Add chords, sixth chords, and seventh chords. And luckily for us, music theorists are not the most creative with their names. So if we start with add chords, an add chord is when you play a triad and add one more note. The most popular is the major and minor add 9. Now, before you get worried, remember, we still only use 7 notes from our scale. The only difference is, when we go above 7, we start to call things by their nickname. You've probably heard the term octave before. It's when you play the same note, but one at a higher or lower pitch, like this. Well, instead of calling this an octave, you can also just call it an 8 because it's the step after 7. 8 and 1 are always the same notes. In this case, they're both C. They're just played in different octaves. By the way, here's a fun fact. The reason that 8 and octave are the same thing is because they both come from the same Latin word, Octavius. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you'll remember Dr. Octopus. His first name is Octavius because octopi have 8 things. So, 1 is 8, 2 is 9, 3 is 10, and so on. And that's why we say add 9 instead of add 2. So we have a major add 9, which is a major triad plus the 9. We also have a minor add 9, which is the minor triad plus the major 9. Sixth chords are similar to add chords. It's a triad plus the 6th degree. Now, we don't call this an add 13 chord because we did not go above the octave, so it's just a 6th chord. To make C major 6, we simply play a C major triad plus the major 6. But instead of calling it C major 6, we usually just call this C6 to save time. Then if you play a minor triad with a major 6, you get a C minor 6 chord. If you're wondering why C minor 6 has a major instead of a minor 6th degree, it's really interesting, but we're going to explain that later too. Now, there's one really cool chord that also combines the 6 and 9 chord. And again, since music theorists are not very creative, it's just called a C6-9 chord. C major triad plus the 6th degree and the 9th degree. Quick recap number 2. Now you know how to build triads, sus chords, add chords, and 6 chords, and we've grouped them into major, minor, and tension categories. That gives us a solid foundation before we get into the world of 7th chords where things start to stretch and get colorful. But before we move into 7th chords, I want to give you a quick tip, which is also the way I teach things in my guitar courses. And you can find this exact same method in my triads course, for example. But I noticed a lot of great guitar teachers online, they teach you to learn your triads and inversions and use them to nail the chord changes. And this makes a lot of sense. It's a really great method. However, if you only have 3 notes to nail the changes, your solo is going to sound boring like this. And that's the part that those really great players never explain to you. They tell you to learn your triads and use them to nail the changes, but then when they actually play examples, they play a bunch of other stuff in addition to the triads, and then you're left wondering, well, what are all of those other notes and how do I find them and use them? Well, here's the secret. There are certain chords that always work together all the time, no matter what. So for example, If someone says play C major and now you're soloing over a C major chord, you could always play either a C major triad, C major 6, C major 9, C6-9. All of these are acceptable options all the time, no matter what. So when you learn your C major triad and inversions, it makes sense to at the same time locate where the 9th is and the 6th is. That way, when you go to play rhythm and guitar, you have all of these really beautiful and unique ideas. And then when you go to nail the changes, instead of just playing a simple, boring 3-note lick, you have the other notes that create the signature licks like this one. That's just my method. I've seen it work for a lot of people. If you're interested, that's my triad course, and in general, I always try to teach things as systematically as possible. Now let's go on to 7th chords, because this is where things can get a little bit tricky. Once we get to the 7th chord category, we need to go back to our original pattern of play, skip, repeat. So as a quick refresher, we'll go to our C major scale and play C, skip D, and repeat. So we play E, skip F, play G, and that's our starter C major triad. Great. If we continue that pattern, we're now going to skip A and play B. So our new chord is C, E, G, B, which gives us a C major 7. It's called C major 7 because the root note is C, we have our major triad, and then we add the 7th on top of that. Now, just like we apply this same pattern to every note of the scale to get our 7 triads, we can apply this same exact pattern to every note in the scale again, but now extend it to the 7th. That's going to give us a new series of chords that are still based on our simple triads. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5. These are the 7th chords that are diatonic to the C major scale. There's nothing fancy or tricky here. These are all just the exact same notes that come from C major, just like a C major triad and a G major triad come from the scale. But you will see that we have some new types of chords. So far we have major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, and minor 7 flat 5. These are 4 of the 6 total 7th chords that exist in music. The other 2 are not found in the major scale, but I'll explain them shortly. Major 7 and minor 7 are pretty self-explanatory. But do you remember when I said this earlier in the video? A 5 major, or dominant, we'll get to that later, I promise. Well, a dominant 7th chord is the more detailed version of the major triad built from the 5th scale degree. And this actually makes perfect sense. I told you we have 3 chord categories: major, minor, and tension. We've been using them throughout the entire video. But once we add the flat 7 and make it a G dominant 7 chord, it becomes a tension chord. So the idea of tension in a chord progression and tension chords are mostly aligned. I just didn't give you the extra note earlier since we were talking about triads, but that 7th degree to make a dominant 7th chord is kind of always understood to be there, even if it's not played. The only other 7th chord found in the major scale that we haven't discussed yet is called a minor 7 flat 5. We're going to put this in the tension category, but this is a special chord that deserves further explanation. It's also sometimes called a half diminished chord, and to understand why, we have to look at our 5th 7th chord out of the 6 total possible, and that is the fully diminished 7th chord. The fully diminished 7th chord is also a tension chord, but it's not found in the major scale. Now, the interesting thing is that the fully diminished 7th chord and the half diminished chord, or minor 7 flat 5, are very similar. They both start off exactly the same: root note, flat 3, flat 5. But then a minor 7 flat 5 chord adds a flat 7. By contrast, a fully diminished 7th chord adds something called a double flat 7. The double flat 7 interval found in the diminished 7th chord is an example of music theorists being annoying and confusing for absolutely no reason whatsoever. That's because, in truth, a double flat 7 is the same thing as a major 6. They are the same exact note, but since it's called a diminished 7th chord and not a diminished plus 6 chord, They can't end it with a major 6 because then it wouldn't technically be a 7th chord. So they call it a double flat 7, kind of like a loophole so that they can still make it a 7th chord. But back to the half diminished chord, minor 7 flat 5, because I said it was special. There are a few funky, really interesting chords that fit into more than one category, and that's really cool, but we'll cover that later as well. We categorize this chord as a tension chord. However, it's one rare example of a chord that fits into multiple categories. And that's because if we take the exact same notes of minor 7 flat 5 and rearrange them, we also create a minor 6 chord. In other words, a minor 6 is just an inversion of a minor 7 flat 5. If it's spelled as minor 6, it falls into the minor chord category. If it's spelled as a minor 7 flat 5, then it fits into the tension category. Again, our 3 categories are still right 98 or 99% of the time. This is just one of those rare exceptions. As a quick side tangent, there's a super talented guitar player in my Lifelong Guitarist program named Laurie. And while he was working through his modes, he fell in love with the minor 7 flat 5 chord and asked me how he can get more of that sound into his songs. And that's a difficult thing because remember, a tension chord like minor 7 flat 5 always wants to go home to a minor or a major chord. So it would be very difficult to write a satisfying song where minor 7 flat 5 is the primary chord we use. But once I showed him the same exact trick I'm showing you right now, that a minor 7 flat 5 chord and a minor 6 are the same, then he could take the minor 6 sound and create songs that are based around minor 6 as the home chord. And believe it or not, Laurie wasn't the first person in all of music history to really love the minor 7 flat 5 or minor 6 sound. It's actually so popular that it has its own special category, a phenomenon called tonic minor. And the idea of tonic minor is going to also bring us to our final 7th chord. But to understand what makes a tonic minor progression special, we need to remember what makes a major chord progression special. As a reminder, it all goes back to this idea of moving from home, like a 1 major chord, to a far off destination, your in-laws, 5 tension or 5 dominant 7, back to home, your 1 chord. Now the interesting thing is that if we take a regular minor scale and try the same idea, 1 minor, 5 chord, back to 1 minor, well, it doesn't work the exact same way. And that's because in a regular minor scale, the 5 chord isn't a dominant 7. It's just a regular minor 7 or minor triad. And although you can make a really beautiful chord progression going from 1 minor to 5 minor, they certainly exist and it's a real thing you can do. It doesn't really have the same drama and intensity as going from 1 to dominant 7 back to 1. So in order to create that same drama we get from a 5 chord that's a dominant 7, at some point in music history, someone decided to just take a minor scale and convert that 5 chord to a dominant 7 chord instead of a minor 7 chord. And to do that, you only need to change 1 note. The minor 3rd becomes a major 3rd. So now we get this sound. But here's the really cool part about it. Once you change that 1 note, we now have a totally new scale, and that scale is called harmonic minor. If you've ever listened to any classical music like Bach or even Yngwie Malmsteen, you've heard the harmonic minor scale before. It has a very dark, ominous, and, well, classical sound. Now, just like with our major scale, we can apply the same skip-repeat method to build a whole new series of chords that apply to harmonic minor. And remember when I said these 2 things earlier? The augmented triad isn't found in the major scale, but I promise we'll cover why that exists as well later. These are 4 of the 6 total 7th chords that exist in music. The other two are not found in the major scale. Well, now you have the answer. We get the augmented triad as the 3 chord in harmonic minor, and we get the fully diminished 7th chord as the 7th chord in harmonic minor. But now we also get our last 7th chord, 7th chord number 6 out of 6, minor major 7, which is the first chord of the harmonic minor scale. So if you want to play a tonic minor chord progression, your one chord can be minor major 7, which is simply a minor triad plus a major 7th. And there's another level of this. We won't get into the full theory, but there's one other scale that's also in the tonic minor category. It's called melodic minor. It's basically just harmonic minor, except the minor 6 is a major 6. So the one chord in melodic minor is a minor 6. And that's why if we're doing a tonic minor progression, we can either use a minor 6 or a minor major 7 as the one chord. Quick recap number 3, I believe. So now you've seen all of the 6 7th chords, some major, some minor, some tension. You also saw how on rare occasion we have some chords that fit both the minor and the tension category, with our minor 7 flat 5 and our minor 6 chord. And we even explored an entirely different style of music, all harmonic minor and melodic minor related chords. The last stop in this chord journey is what we call extended chords, and they're basically anything with more than 4 notes. But as you'll see, the method we've done from the beginning doesn't change at all. It's the same exact system. So believe it or not, to understand this more scary, complicated category, we go right back to our original pattern: play, skip, repeat. If we apply that pattern to our C major and D minor 7th chords respectively, we end up with a C major 9 and a D minor 9. Now, the important rule about extended chords is this: once you say something is a major 9 or a minor 9, you're also implying every note that comes before it. So a C major 9 isn't just C, E, G with the 9th D. It must also include the major 7th, which is a B. And then a D minor 9 must include the D minor triad, the flat 7, and then the 9th on top, C. That's also the difference between a C add 9 and a C 9. C add 9 is just the triad plus the 9th. C 9 is the triad, the 7th, and the 9th. Every add chord is 4 notes, but a C 9 implies the 7th, which gives us 5 notes. And now that we're in extended chords, there are also a few new musical considerations. For example, and this is really just one of many examples, the logical next step after a major 9 would be a C major 11. And while that chord theoretically exists, in practice, we almost never play it. Let me explain why. A C major 11 chord includes the C major triad, plus the 7th, plus the 9th, and now also the 11th, which you'll remember is just another name for the 4th scale degree. Quick reminder, 2 is equal to 9, 4 is equal to 11, and so on. Now here's where the issue comes in. When you add the 11 or the 4 to a major chord, you're now combining the sound of a sus chord and a major chord. You're mixing chord categories, a tension with a major, and things don't really work well. Mixing the major 3rd and the perfect 4th creates a clash that doesn't sit well in most harmonic contexts. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use it. If you like the sound, feel free to create an entire song around it. Rules are meant to be broken, and if you break a rule and it actually sounds really cool and you become famous, then in a few decades, a music theorist who has a PhD just comes along, takes what you did, makes it a new category, and then all of a sudden it's part of music theory. So don't worry about breaking rules. And honestly, maybe you should use it, because if you start to play that major 11 back to back to back enough times, it starts to sound pretty cool. But I started this video by making you one promise. Remember when I said this? Now here's the really interesting part. We followed this exact same pattern to make almost every chord, even the ones that sound complicated like major 7 sharp 11. Well, now I'll finally explain it. If we shift our focus away from C major and instead look at F major, a different major chord within the C major scale, and we apply the same play, skip, repeat pattern, we end up with a very popular and sophisticated sounding chord, F major 7 sharp 11. This chord includes the F major triad, plus the 7th, plus the major 9th, and the sharp 11. Although on guitar, it can be difficult to get all of the notes, so sometimes we just skip the 9th, and that's totally okay. But here's the thing you should remember. This fancy sounding chord is built entirely from the regular major scale. So if you're ever somewhere where you're playing chords and someone says play a 4 major chord, and instead of playing a boring F major triad, you play an F major 7 sharp 11, you're going to sound really fancy. Better yet, if you're ever jamming and you get to a 4 major chord, instead of playing an F major triad, you can play an F major 7 sharp 11 arpeggio. And again, you're going to sound really, really sophisticated. This is the stuff I always teach in my courses. Whenever you're learning your chords and chord vocabulary and how to play rhythm guitar, you might as well just also learn how to nail the changes because it's all right there. It's the same exact information. Now, this major 7 sharp 11 chord is far more common than the regular major 11 because once you raise that 11 to a sharp 11, you eliminate that clash with the major 3rd. Now, I'll be honest, there are a few other extended chord rules, and if we were to go into every variation of extended chords, this video would be twice as long. I cover all of this in my other materials, but if you're looking for the next logical step, it's of course to start combining these chords into real chord progressions and learning how and why that all works. So you'll want to check out my every guitar progression explained video. Watch that next.